Today, we explore the story of humanity, a species once thought weak, yet harboring a hidden power so vast that even the greatest galactic empires could not fathom it. When the Vra Empire threatens to destroy them, humans begin to awaken abilities sealed for millions of years, abilities not only to fight but to protect what they love. Will humanity use this power to defend, or will they become a threat to the galaxy itself? Join us on their journey in HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story. The Galactic Consortium's meeting hall was a vast expanse, almost beyond comprehension, an architectural marvel that stretched toward infinity, adorned with shimmering crystalline walls and strange, living structures that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own. It was a room that blended the ancient with the hypermodern, where time itself seemed to bend. The air was thick with the low hum of conversation, alien languages swirling like a distant, forgotten melody. Each species that filled the room was as unique as the stars themselves, some humanoid, others completely unrecognizable, bizarre shapes, floating entities, and creatures with multiple appendages or no form at all. At the center of this swirling assembly stood Alina Ray, the only human present, her 5 feet 6 inches frame feeling like a speck in the ocean of towering alien figures. Despite the overwhelming size of the room and the unfathomable number of eyes trained on her, she stood tall, her posture erect, eyes calm but sharp. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but she refused to show even the slightest crack in her composure. Chancellor Ziv, the towering figure at the front of the assembly, his alien body radiating an aura of wisdom and power, addressed the gathered species in a deep, resonant voice that echoed across the hall. His multifaceted, luminous skin shifted like liquid glass, reflecting the light in ethereal hues as he spoke. Chancellor Ziv, the human stands before us as Earth's representative. After 50 years of observation, we welcome humanity to the consortium. The words hung in the air, a calculated declaration. The room erupted into a murmur, a chorus of whispers from all corners. Each alien species, from the towering, four-armed Trell who stood next to Alina, to the insectoid Xerax who hovered beside his hovering exoskeleton, whispered to each other, their expressions a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and, for some, disdain. Alina's gaze swept across the crowd. Exorlath, the representative of the Vra Empire, stepped forward with a slow, deliberate gait. His scaled skin glistened under the artificial lights, shifting from dark greens to shimmering silvers. His 4 eyes narrowed, the pupils narrowing into slits as he sized up the human before him. His presence was like a predator, tense and ready to strike. Exorlath, a species that has not fought a real war in over a century? How weak! His voice was a gravelly growl, thick with contempt. The tension in the air thickened, like the oppressive heat before a storm. Alina stood perfectly still, not a single flicker of emotion betraying her thoughts. She knew exactly what Exorlath was doing, testing her, pushing her, trying to provoke a reaction. She could feel the collective eyes of the room turning toward her. Her heart beat steadily, her breath steady. She had trained for moments like this, in moments where her mind needed to remain sharp, focused, undistracted by the noise around her. Alina Ray, calmly, we value peace, but we also know how to protect what is ours. The words rang clear and strong, each syllable precise, as though the weight of humanity's history rested upon her shoulders. There was no hesitation in her voice, no doubt. She had spoken with the certainty of someone who knew that peace was not a weakness, but a choice made by those who knew how much power lay in restraint. Yet, behind her calm exterior, Alina could feel the undercurrents of danger, something dark and unseen, lurking beneath the surface. She couldn't ignore the sharp, predatory gaze of Exorlath, who seemed to regard her not as a diplomat but as prey. The Vra Empire had long been a warmongering force, conquering planets with ruthless efficiency. Alina knew that the Vra saw peace as something unnatural, a concept that had no place in their universe. To them, peace was merely a mask for weakness. As she held Exorlath's gaze, she couldn't help but wonder if the Vra already knew what humanity was truly capable of. The room was silent for a moment, the tension palpable. Then, the hum of voices resumed, the alien delegates shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some of the more aggressive species, like the Krell, a towering, insect-like race with metallic exoskeletons, chittered among themselves, their clicking jaws betraying a mixture of uncertainty and excitement. They were always eager for war, always on the lookout for new conflicts to fuel their endless thirst for power. The Sadhak, gelatinous beings whose very existence seemed to bend light, watched with calculated interest, their shifting forms shimmering in the dim light. But it was the Trell, Alina's assistant, who offered a quiet sigh of relief. The four-armed alien's demeanor was always gentle, but Alina could tell that even he was nervous about the political minefield she was navigating. Though Trell had been one of her few allies here, his species was much less warlike and far more pragmatic. Trell, whispering, almost to himself, "You've handled them well. The Vra are not easy to placate." Alina gave him a subtle nod of appreciation, though her thoughts were elsewhere. She felt the weight of her role, not just as a representative of Earth, but as the first human to step into the heart of the galactic stage. She had hoped that humanity would be seen as a species of intelligence, peace, and diplomacy. But she also knew, deep down, that peace was often a fragile mask, a veneer hiding the potential for great power. Humanity had its own secrets of strength, adaptability, and a history that was written in both the blood of war and the beauty of peace. As Exorlatha's eyes lingered on her, the tension shifted subtly. The Vra's focus on conquest was clear. They would see humanity as either a tool to be used or a threat to be destroyed. Alina could already sense the darkness that lingered in the back of her mind, an echo of something ancient, something embedded deep within the DNA of all humans. Alina was not just a diplomat. She was a living reminder that humanity had once been a species forged in the fires of war. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would need to awaken that power again, sooner than any of them had anticipated. The consortium's science wing felt like a labyrinth of knowledge, a place where humanity's understanding of the universe was both expanded and dwarfed. Alina Ray stood at the center of her lab, the sterile, white walls humming with the quiet buzz of advanced technology. Screens displayed a continuous stream of data, maps of distant stars, star charts, detailed planetary compositions, and encrypted codes she had only begun to decipher. The machinery around her was far beyond anything Earth had ever developed, sleek, glimmering devices that seemed to pulse with energy, their surfaces shimmering with an iridescent glow. Their movements were almost organic, as though they breathed in time with the space around them. Alina ran her fingers across the data console, pulling up blueprints for the consortium's defense systems. Her eyes narrowed as she reviewed the intricate designs. Something about the way the systems were arranged didn't sit right with her. There were gaps, spaces where the security was weak, almost as if someone had intentionally left them open. A subtle alarm rang in her mind. The data was undeniable, the Vra fleet was approaching. But why? And why hadn't the consortium's higher-ups noticed these weaknesses? As her thoughts raced, Alina turned to her terminal and began analyzing Vra ship movements, tapping commands rapidly, her fingers a blur on the holographic keys. The readouts on the screen shifted from innocuous data to something far darker. Ships moving toward Earth's sector, maneuvering closer and closer. The Vra weren't just passing by, they were preparing for something. Alina muttered to herself, barely audible in the silence of her lab, "The Vra are coming. But we're not ready, yet." The words carried a weight, a terrible truth that gnawed at her. Humanity had always been seen as weak by the more powerful alien races, peaceful, fragile, untested. But this was different. The signs were clear now. Something was coming. A storm. Her thoughts were interrupted when she was summoned to an unfamiliar part of the station. Professor Jax, a frail, yet wise alien archaeologist, had called for her. He was a being of incredible age, his skin paper-thin, resembling the delicate wings of an insect. His body was a patchwork of translucent veins that seemed to pulse with a quiet energy. His alien face, almost ethereal, carried an expression of both solemnity and urgency. "Come, Alina," Jax's voice crackled, resonating with ancient knowledge. "There is something you must see." They traversed the narrow, dimly lit corridors of the consortium station, the air growing cooler as they descended deeper into the archives. The walls here were lined with artifacts, some beautiful, some terrifying. Alina had never been down this far before. There was a sense of secrecy in the air, as though the very walls held knowledge they weren't ready to share. They entered a small room filled with strange artifacts, objects she could not begin to understand. Metal pieces of intricate design, each etched with symbols Alina recognized as older than any known language. There was a metal disc, shining faintly under the light, and a set of glowing, fragmented devices whose edges hummed with an almost otherworldly energy. The room was suffused with the scent of old metals and dust, the air thick with the weight of forgotten history. Professor Jax picked up a small pyramid-shaped object, its surface glowing faintly, like a soft, pulsing heartbeat. These artifacts, Jax began, his voice grave, are remnants of the predecessors and ancient species that once ruled the galaxy. They vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind only fragments of their civilization. These, however, are more than relics. They are a record of what they created, and what they left behind. Alina stepped closer, her eyes drawn to the pyramid. She could feel the faint pull of it, as though something about the object was calling to her, deep within her mind. Her fingertips brushed against its surface, and the room seemed to shift. Visions flashed before her eyes, battle strategies, ancient technologies, memories that didn't belong to her. Her pulse quickened as she pulled back, feeling a strange sense of familiarity, a memory that wasn't her own. DNA, ancient and dormant, stirred somewhere deep within her, just as it had for millions of years. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Professor Jax didn't respond immediately. Instead, he placed the pyramid on a scanner, and a series of holographic symbols sprung to life, dancing in the air before them. The symbols shifted and rearranged themselves in complex patterns, forming something that made Alina's heart race. As the symbols shifted into place, the shape they formed was unmistakable, a DNA strand, glowing brightly in the air. The strand shifted, zooming in on certain sections that glimmered with strange markings. Alina's eyes widened as she recognized the patterns. "That DNA, it's human," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes," Jax said softly. "These artifacts tell a secret. Humans were engineered by the predecessors as warriors, crafted with specific abilities dormant in your genetic code. When your species faces extinction, those abilities awaken. When you are pushed to the brink of destruction, you will fight." Alina's mind reeled as the implications of Jax's words sank in. She had spent her entire life believing humanity to be a peaceful species, built on the ideals of cooperation, growth, and unity. But now, the truth was laid bare before her. Humanity was not only peaceful, but also something far more dangerous, a species created to fight. "What does this mean?" Alina asked, her voice thick with disbelief. We're not just a species that stumbled upon war. We were designed for it?" Jax's eyes grew dark as he nodded. "Yes. The predecessors believed that the key to galactic balance was to create a species capable of both peace and destruction. They engineered you, Alina. You were meant to be warriors, with the ability to adapt and survive in the most extreme of circumstances. But those abilities were suppressed. Dormant." Alina stood frozen, a strange sense of unease crawling through her veins. Humans were designed to fight, to adapt to warfare at a genetic level. But why? And how much of that power was still buried deep within her? Within every human? As Jax spoke, his words seemed to echo in her mind, "You will fight when pushed to extinction." And that was when it hit her. The Vra weren't just coming for Earth, they were about to wake up something inside her, inside every human. Something that could change the fate of the galaxy. Something far more dangerous than the Vra could ever imagine. The cold silence of space was shattered by a blaring red alert that echoed across the human colonies. The signal was sharp, urgent, and unmistakable. It was the kind of sound that sent shivers down the spine, an indication that something terrible was unfolding. On Mars, the colony, a sprawling complex of domed structures nestled in the arid Martian landscape, had been a symbol of humanity's growing presence in space. The colony was bustling with life, scientists, engineers, workers, and families, all contributing to humanity's expansion beyond Earth. But now, all that would be reduced to dust. The sky above Mars, once a quiet expanse, was suddenly filled with the terrifying shape of Vra warships, massive, sleek, and dark, like shadows sweeping across the red planet. The ships moved in a perfect formation, their surfaces glistening with a menacing gleam, as though their very presence was a promise of violence. In a matter of moments, Vra bombers descended upon the colony. The thunderous roar of their weapons shattering the silence of Mars was deafening. The domes that once stood proudly protecting the human settlers were no match for the brutal assault. Explosions ripped through the air, sending plumes of dust and debris into the red skies. The colony's defenses, crude by comparison to the Vra's might, were overwhelmed in an instant. Through the swirling chaos, the broadcast from the Vra Empire boomed across every communication channel, its chilling message reverberating through the hearts of those who still clung to hope. Vra Empire broadcast, the Mars colony is now under our control. Resistance is futile. The word sent a wave of disbelief across Earth's military command. The Vra had struck with an intensity that no one had expected. The attack was brutal and swift, a display of overwhelming power. Over 7,000 humans were killed in those first few moments, scientists, workers, civilians, all reduced to nothing more than ash and rubble. The Martian sky, once a calm and distant vision of hope, was now painted with the grim hues of destruction. The once thriving colony, filled with the promise of human expansion, had become a tomb. On Earth, the consortium's monitors flickered to life, their screens filling with the horror of the situation. A flurry of messages filled the channels, but the Earth Defense Force was slow to respond. Their military was still recovering from years of isolationist policies, and their resources were stretched thin. The Vra Empire's aggression was unprecedented, and Earth was ill-prepared for such an onslaught. At the consortium headquarters, representatives watched in stunned silence, their faces a mix of disbelief and concern. Alina Ray stood in the midst of it all, her eyes locked on the data streaming in. The attack on Mars had escalated quickly, and yet, Earth's response was unlike anything they had seen before. Instead of sending a fleet to retaliate, Earth's leadership had requested humanitarian aid. Their message was clear: help the survivors. Rebuild what we've lost. This response shocked the consortium. Alien species known for their military might and swift reactions couldn't fathom such a peaceful approach in the face of utter devastation. The Vra Empire had demonstrated that peace was a fragile illusion, but humanity's ability to value life even in the face of destruction was almost incomprehensible to these galactic powers. Alina Ray, to Trell, her voice low: something's happening. Humans are not responding as expected. Trell, the four-armed alien assistant, nodded in agreement. His species, the Trellians, were known for their diplomatic wisdom and peaceful nature. They could empathize with Earth's situation, but even Trell couldn't ignore the strange undercurrent in Alina's voice. There was a shift happening, one that was beyond anyone's understanding. As the dust settled over Mars, the aftermath was almost as unsettling as the initial attack. Survivors began to report strange occurrences, small at first, like fleeting moments of heightened awareness. People were moving faster, reacting quicker, solving problems that had once taken hours in mere minutes. There was a new sharpness in their reflexes, a sudden clarity in their thoughts. It wasn't just adrenaline, it was something deeper, something different. Alina, unable to shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest, began researching the reports, delving into the neurological and physiological data coming in from Mars. Her brow furrowed as she scrolled through the data, piecing together the fragments of information that were coming through. What she discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. Humans were starting to show signs of increased intelligence, their reaction times had improved significantly, their cognitive abilities had skyrocketed, and their muscle reflexes had heightened at an almost alarming rate. It was as if their genetic memory, once dormant, was being unlocked. Alina's heart raced as she reviewed the data. These weren't just the effects of stress or fear. This was something else entirely, something that couldn't be explained by mere biology or psychology. Her mind wandered back to the artifacts she had seen in the consortium's archives, the predecessor DNA strands. Could it be? Could the Vra attack be the catalyst for this awakening? The dormant abilities within humanity's genetic code had been suppressed for millions of years, but perhaps this event, this destruction on Mars, had triggered the activation. What if the predecessors had designed humanity to awaken in times of great crisis, to adapt to the chaos of war? As the data continued to stream in, Alina saw the unsettling trend continue. Humans who had never been trained in combat were suddenly exhibiting the ability to anticipate moves, to think and act with a military precision that was impossible to ignore. Soldiers who had once struggled with coordination were now moving in perfect synchronization, as if they had been born for this. Engineers on Mars were building new tools and weapons at an unprecedented rate, their minds working faster than ever before. Alina's fingers hovered over her console as she connected the dots. The awakening had begun. her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden ping from Trell's console.
Trell, with urgency. Alina, look at this. The human response to the attack. It's not what we expected. On his screen, Alina saw an image: humans in combat, strategizing with precision, their every move calculated, yet fluid.
They had become warriors in a matter of days, but more than that, they had become defenders. It was as if their innate purpose had been unlocked. The peace they had fought for had been shattered, and in its place, a warrior species was rising, one that had been sleeping for millennia.
Alina couldn't help but think back to what she had learned about the predecessors.
The dormant abilities within humanity's DNA weren't just a defense mechanism, they were purposeful, created to allow humans to evolve in the face of extinction.
The question now was, what would humanity do with this newfound power?
The consortium's research wing was quiet, save for the rhythmic tapping of Alina's fingers on her data console. She had become consumed with her latest findings, unable to pull herself away from the data streaming in. The news was both fascinating and terrifying. The dormant warrior genes embedded deep within humanity's genetic code were beginning to stir. It was subtle at first, small anomalies in human behavior and physiology, but as the days passed, the changes were undeniable. The first signs had emerged in the aftermath of the Vra's attack on Mars. Survivors reported unusual heightened senses. Soldiers who had never received formal training were suddenly making impossible decisions, reacting with reflexes that bordered on inhuman.
Engineers were solving problems that had once seemed insurmountable.
And the more Alina dug into the data, the clearer it became: humans were evolving, but not in the way anyone had expected.
This wasn't a natural adaptation to their environment.
This was something far older, far deeper, a mechanism built into their very DNA, triggered by extreme circumstances. Alina's lab was dimly lit, the only source of illumination coming from the faint glow of her holographic screens. She was piecing together the evidence, carefully examining the genetic data she had received from Mars. The strands of human DNA she had studied before now seemed to pulse with new energy, like a sleeping giant finally awakening. It was as though the genetic markers, those dormant sections in their code, were coming to life, responding to the peril humanity faced.
She sat back, blinking in disbelief.
The predecessors, the ancient species that had engineered humanity, had designed them as warriors.
But they hadn't intended for this transformation to happen quickly.
The awakening was supposed to be gradual, carefully managed, to prevent a species from being overwhelmed by its own power. But now, with the Vra threat looming, the dormant abilities were being triggered prematurely. Alina rubbed her eyes, feeling the weight of the discovery pressing down on her chest. She turned to Trell, her four-armed alien assistant, who had been working tirelessly by her side.
His once calm demeanor was now tinged with a deep concern that Alina couldn't ignore.
The changes were accelerating, and the signs of something far greater were becoming more and more apparent. Trell's voice was low, his skin shifting color to a darker hue, a sign of his unease.
It's happening. The dormant abilities are awakening in humans. It's not a coincidence.
As Alina processed the implications of his words, her mind wandered to Admiral James Chen, the leader of Earth's defense forces. She had heard reports of his strategic genius, how his battle plans had taken on an almost otherworldly precision. He was outmaneuvering the Vra fleet, anticipating their every move with a confidence that seemed beyond human capabilities. In the quiet of her lab, Alina spoke aloud, more to herself than to Trell.
How is he doing it? How is he anticipating the Vra's movements?
Trell's answer came softly, but with a certain understanding that made Alina's skin prickle.
He's not anticipating them. He's remembering.
Alina froze, her eyes narrowing as the weight of his words sank in.
Remembering.
Her thoughts raced back to the predecessor artifacts she had studied. One of the symbols she had seen was a representation of human genetic memory, a form of inherited knowledge, passed down through generations, perhaps even altered by the predecessors themselves.
Could it be that Admiral Chen's brilliance wasn't entirely his own? Was he tapping into something ancient? Trell's next words confirmed the terrifying truth. Admiral Chen's tactical genius is linked to these dormant genes. He is remembering the strategies of warriors from humanity's past, strategies passed down in their DNA, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The connection was undeniable.
The genetic code Alina had studied wasn't just a set of instructions for building a human body, it was a blueprint for battle, embedded with the memories of past warriors, long suppressed, but now stirring to life. Humanity, in the face of extinction, was being reborn not as a peaceful species, but as something different. Something dangerous. As the threat of the Vra grew closer, Alina noticed that more humans began exhibiting similar abilities. Pilots in the Earth fleet, once considered average, were now making impossible maneuvers in combat, evading enemy fire with impossible precision. Engineers, facing the overwhelming task of fortifying Mars, had developed unheard-of solutions to technological problems in mere hours. Even civilians, those far removed from the horrors of war, found themselves compelled to act in unison, as if drawn together by an invisible force. Soldiers who had once struggled with coordination were now moving as if they had been born for the battlefield. They acted in perfect harmony, without communication, anticipating each other's moves with an almost telepathic connection. It was as though the very fabric of humanity's collective unconscious was awakening, a primal instinct taking hold. Alina watched as data poured in from across the colonies. Humans, under immense stress, were suddenly operating at peak efficiency. She could no longer deny the truth. This was no longer the result of simple training or coincidence. These humans were becoming something else, something far beyond what anyone had ever anticipated. But as these abilities surged, Alina felt a deeper unease. While humanity had been designed to survive and adapt, there was always the risk of this power becoming uncontrolled, of it spiraling beyond anyone's ability to harness it. The Consortium, having watched humanity's peaceful rise for centuries, had underestimated the full depth of the species' potential. They saw humanity as young and fragile, a race that had yet to truly understand its place in the galaxy. But now, as the warrior genes began to awaken, they realized the truth: humanity was far from fragile. And once awakened, this power would be impossible to stop. Trell's voice broke through Alina's spiraling thoughts. What will they become, Alina? Will they be able to control this power? Alina's gaze shifted to the data on her screen. The unprecedented growth in human capabilities was clear. It was no longer a matter of if humans could fight, it was how they would choose to fight. Would they use their newfound abilities to survive and defend, or would they fall prey to the destructive urges that lay dormant in their genes? One thing was certain: the awakening had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The vast emptiness of space was about to be torn apart by the arrival of the Vra Empire's fleet, a force so massive, its shadow stretched across the stars like an ominous wave crashing toward Earth. 200 warships, sleek and menacing, their dark hulls gleaming under the distant light of distant suns, were approaching with chilling precision. Each ship was a fortress, bristling with weapons of unimaginable power, and their arrival sent tremors through the human fleet stationed on the outskirts of Earth's atmosphere. The Vra commander watched the live feed of the human fleet through his personal viewing screen, his cold, reptilian eyes narrowing as he observed their seemingly disorganized array. His lips curled into a smirk, exposing sharp teeth that gleamed with malice. Vra Captain, with disdain, the human fleet is defenseless. We can crush them easily. The Vra Empire had no reason to think otherwise. For centuries, they had crushed weaker civilizations underfoot, their overwhelming firepower and ruthlessness leaving no room for doubt. Earth's military was inexperienced, untested, and their fleet, small in comparison to the mighty Vra Armada, looked like nothing more than a scattering of insignificant specks. The Vra had never truly considered humanity a threat. But that would soon change. On Earth's flagship, the Resilience, Admiral James Chin stood at the command console, his face hard and unflinching, a beacon of focus and determination. He had been expecting this. The Vra had no idea what was coming. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to survive. In the control room, the crew worked in synchronized harmony, the low hum of the ship's systems blending with the steady beat of their hearts. Alina Ray, her eyes glued to the display, couldn't help but feel a rising sense of awe as she watched Admiral Chen move through the tactical displays, his actions fluid, deliberate, almost instinctive. Admiral Chen, stoically, we can't afford to fail. This is our moment. He didn't say much, but the weight of his words settled over the crew like a force field, sharpening their focus and determination. Chen's unorthodox battle strategy, a series of unpredictable and non-linear formations, had already started taking shape. To the untrained eye, it might seem chaotic, but to those who understood, it was a brilliant move to confound the Vra's precise, calculated attack patterns.
Trell, whispering to Alina his formation, "It's like nothing I've ever seen. It's designed to confuse."
Alina watched as the human fleet scattered into an almost random arrangement. Ships moved in what appeared to be uncoordinated paths, their destinations unclear. From the outside, it looked like chaos. The Vra would never understand it. To them, strategy was about power, about direct confrontation. But humans were different. They didn't think like the Vra. They thought outside the box, adaptable, unpredictable. As the Vra ships surged forward, their weapons charging, eager to destroy, they were blindsided by the first move of the human fleet. Suddenly, Earth's ships changed formation mid-flight, moving in perfect sync, like a school of fish shifting direction in unison. The Vra, expecting a defensive formation, were thrown off balance. They opened fire, but the human ships dodged and maneuvered in ways that defied logic. What was once a weak, vulnerable fleet was now a shadow, slipping and dodging through the chaos of war. Vra commander, shouting in disbelief, "Impossible! Their movements, they predict our every move." The Vra ships fired relentlessly, sending volleys of energy blasts into the vacuum of space, but the human ships seemed to anticipate each strike, moving as though they were one mind. The Vra fleet could not comprehend how the humans were evading their attacks with such precision. Each human ship appeared to have a mind of its own, but there was a deeper connection at play, something far beyond the simple laws of physics. As Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold, the precision of his fleet's movements began to blur the lines between reality and something otherworldly. It was as though the ships weren't just moving randomly, they were responding to something inherent in their design, something within their genetic memory that was slowly awakening. With each passing moment, the humans moved faster, their reflexes honed to perfection. The Vra, once confident in their overwhelming numbers and firepower, began to feel the tide turning against them. The human fleet, though smaller, was executing maneuvers that defied expectations. It was as if they had always known how to fight, how to win, they had only needed the right moment to awaken. Admiral Chen, his voice steady and unwavering, gave the next order with chilling precision. "Admiral Chen, hold the line. Formation's Aegis." The human ships moved in a new pattern, one that was even more complex and unexpected than before. Small ships linked together in a shield formation, the larger vessels moving with perfect synchronization, creating a defensive barrier that no Vra commander could predict. They were protected, not just by shields, but by the minds of the crew, as if each human ship was an extension of their will. The Vra, confident that they could overwhelm their enemy with sheer force, were beginning to falter. Their attacks were falling short, their ships were being taken down one by one, and they couldn't even keep up with the unpredictable movement of Earth's forces. The Vra commander, now furious and panicked, ordered his fleet to engage in a suicide charge. The remaining Vra warships, realizing that their usual tactics weren't working, began to close in on Earth's ships in a last-ditch effort to crush them. But it was too late. The human fleet, moving in perfect unison, turned the tide. The once hesitant humans now operated as a single cohesive force. The Vra ships found themselves overwhelmed, their weapon systems failing as human vessels moved through their defenses with eerie precision. Explosions rippled through the Vra fleet as Earth's ships launched pinpoint strikes against key targets. The battle reached a climax when a group of human marines boarded a crippled Vra flagship. Moving with impossible coordination, the marines disabled the enemy's self-destruct systems, capturing the ship intact. The Vra fleet was not only defeated but captured, the technology and vessels of the once feared empire now in the hands of humanity. As the final Vra ships retreated, leaving behind a broken fleet and a shattered empire, Alina Ray stood at the command station, her breath catching in her chest. What she had witnessed was nothing short of extraordinary. The human fleet, a species once underestimated and considered weak, had just defeated the most powerful force in the galaxy. The Vra Empire had been left in disarray, their once proud fleet reduced to nothing more than debris and prisoners. Earth had not just survived, it had risen, awakening something deep within humanity that no one could have predicted. And as Admiral Chen's voice echoed across the comms, Alina couldn't help but wonder, what had humanity truly become? Admiral Chen, with quiet awe, "We've won, but the war is far from over. The grand chamber of the Galactic Consortium was silent, the weight of history pressing down on every member present. Thousands of years of galactic peace had shaped the consortium's philosophy: strength through diplomacy, unity through nonviolence. Yet today, in this monumental gathering, the very core of that peace was being challenged. The Vra threat had been neutralized. The battle had been won, but the implications were far from settled. Humanity, a species once thought weak and naive, had revealed a strength so profound it shook the foundations of the galaxy. The Council now faced a question: what should be done with this new power? What role would humanity play in a universe that had never seen a species like them? Alina Ray stood at the center of the chamber, her form framed by the colossal arching windows that overlooked the galaxy. She could feel the weight of the consortium's eyes upon her, their gazes a mix of awe, fear, and suspicion. Behind her, a holographic display flickered to life, showing the data from humanity's recent victories, the footage of Earth's fleet moving with precision, and the overwhelming coordination that had baffled the Vra Empire. Chancellor Ziv, the imposing leader of the consortium, his form both graceful and unnerving, leaned forward. His multifaceted eyes glimmered, reflecting the stars outside. He spoke with the authority of one who had seen empires rise and fall. Chancellor Ziv, humanity's power has been proven. But what is its true nature? We saw what you were capable of during the battle with the Vra. What else lies dormant within your kind? Can we trust you? The question was heavy, a challenge wrapped in layers of concern. The Vra Empire had underestimated humanity. The consortium now feared that humanity's awakening could be both a blessing and a curse. The memories of war, of destruction, now coursed through their veins. The question that lingered in the air was whether humanity would be able to wield that power without succumbing to the darkness of destruction. Alina stood tall, her voice steady, as though the weight of the moment had only sharpened her resolve. Alina Ray, humans were designed as protectors. We fight not to conquer, but to defend. These abilities come with balance, empathy, creativity, and a deep need to protect what we love. Her words rang out, filling the chamber with a quiet confidence. The council members shifted, exchanging glances. The idea that humans, a species that had once been considered fragile and naive, could hold within them such power was unsettling. But Alina had witnessed the shift in her people, the way their minds had begun to move in unison, like a single force guiding them forward. She continued, her voice more urgent now, revealing a deeper truth that had been hidden for millennia. Alina Ray, the predecessors created us, humans, to be a species capable of both destruction and peace. We were designed to protect, to guard the galaxy when the time came, and to restore balance. But we are not meant to be mindless warriors. We were meant to awaken when necessary, to rise only in defense. The council's murmurs grew louder as Alina's words began to settle in. Ancient texts, rediscovered during her research, now revealed their deepest secret: humanity was not an accidental evolution. They were a tool, forged by a species long gone, with abilities that could shape the fate of the galaxy itself. But in the eyes of the consortium, that knowledge came with a great fear. Could a species that had once been a tool of war now be trusted with the power to protect? What if humanity turned its powers against them? What if, one day, humanity would awaken and become a force of conquest, just as the Vra had once done? Chancellor Ziv, but how can we be certain? You speak of balance, but how can we trust that humanity will not use its powers to dominate, to impose its will on the galaxy? The room fell silent. It was a valid question, one that even Alina could not answer with certainty. Humanity had always valued peace, but the events on Mars, the battle with the Vra, had revealed something far more primal, something that could not be undone. Humanity had been shaped by war, but they had also shown that they could choose something else. Alina's gaze shifted to the holographic display, which now showed the faces of human leaders, those who had chosen peace after the destruction of Mars. They had asked for aid, not retribution. They had chosen to rebuild, not to retaliate. That decision, perhaps, was the true measure of what humanity could become. Alina Ray, we want peace. But if pushed, we will defend ourselves. We offer our protection to the galaxy, with strict rules governing the use of our abilities. We are not conquerors, and we do not wish to be. We only wish to ensure that what happened on Mars never happens again. That is the role we seek, protectors, guardians of the peaceful worlds." Her words echoed in the stillness of the room, hanging in the air like a challenge, a promise.
The consortium had always been built on cooperation and diplomacy, but the question remained, could they afford to trust a species like humanity, a species that was capable of such immense power?
For what seemed like an eternity, the council deliberated in hushed tones, their voices murmuring across the vast chamber. Some were swayed by Alina's conviction, seeing in her words a glimpse of a future where humanity could truly be the guardians they claimed to be. Others, however, remained skeptical, their fear of humanity's potential for destruction clouding their judgment. In the end, the consortium voted. Humanity would become the guardians of the galaxy. They would patrol the borders of consortium space, ensuring that no aggressor would threaten the peaceful worlds. But there would be oversight, strict regulations governing the use of their powers. Humanity would be monitored, their every move observed, to ensure they did not stray from their role as protectors. Alina Ray, reflecting, after the vote we're not gods, but we are the protectors. And when the galaxy needs us, we will awaken, together. As she looked out at the galaxy beyond, Alina felt the weight of her people's destiny settling upon her shoulders. Humanity was on the precipice of a new era, one where they would be both protectors and warriors. It was a role they had never asked for, but it was one they were now bound to fulfill. And as the stars stretched out before her, she knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's journey had just begun. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Stay tuned for more thrilling tales of love, war, and the power of humanity in the vast universe. Remember, the battle for the future is just beginning, and we're only getting started. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss out on the next adventure. Until then, keep dreaming, keep fighting, and never forget, the universe is full of endless possibilities. See you in the next chapter of HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story.